Welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christine Marie, and there's something about doing this show on the daily um, where sometimes you show up in a particular way where you weren't expecting. And tonight is one of those nights and times, I guess you could say. Um, Earlier this week, I felt like I was in a little bit of a not a funk. I felt weird. Um, so I guess funk, but that's not how I would have labeled it or called it. I was just starting to feel a little bit strange. I had this wonderful, wonderful weekend where I was hosting a group and celebrating life, um, and Monday everyone left, and I felt so incredibly exhausted. After I host knowing retreats, I know that I'm just toast. Like I need to take off the next day and just be an introvert and kind of like tend to myself, like sleep and eat well and things like that, just kind of resupply and nourish my body. And it felt like that. And then Tuesday, I felt kind of similar. Yesterday, I felt kind of similar. And today, Thursday, I was just like, what is going on? Like, why do I not? It's not even a not having energy. I just feel so off. And there's something about knowing ourselves well enough to be able to identify when those moments come upon us so that our subconscious isn't the one in the driver's seat, but that we're able to maintain a state of consciousness and awareness of, oh, this is different. Let me just kind of pay attention to what's going on. And I realized yesterday that the season's changing. The temperature outside is getting a little bit colder. It's been a chilly weather over the last couple of days here in the Northern Virginia area. And I thought of my brother-in-law 2 days ago. And I know that the anniversary of his death is coming up. And then I also know that what would have been my wedding anniversary next week is coming up as well. And it's just funny how those things that, we think that we've healed from, processed, moved past, not necessarily my brother-in-law per se, I know, and I don't even want to move past from the loss of him. He's so precious to me. And that was actually a big reason why I never went to therapy, why I never healed, was because for so long I thought that the act of effectively healing from his death was almost a dishonoring of him and a leaving behind, rather than understanding that in grief, we can carry that person with us both in grief and in joy. We don't have to actually displace that person. When we move out of grief, we can actually still honor their memory and hold them closely and tightly to us in joy and in the whole process of transformation. I mean, isn't that honoring the person more than just sitting in the ashes of the loss in and of itself? And so as I think about my brother-in-law, and I believe it will be 11 years this year, in October 5th, 2014 is when he was killed. And so I know that now that in the transformation of my own self, I actually can honor his life and hold him more tightly to me than ever before. It's not just in grief that we honor the person and hold them closely in memory. But with this anniversary coming up and just thinking about what would have been my, if I can do the math, 12th anniversary, wedding anniversary, it's funny how those things just catch you off guard. I've learned now after 11 years that around this time, as the seasons start to change, my subconscious knows that this is around the time 11 years ago that we lost Nate. And now with this wedding anniversary coming up, it'll be 4 years 3 years, I guess, since my husband left and we are no longer married. And so it's like, okay, my body's still learning that grief. And like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And even now, as I'm saying this out loud, if what I said earlier is true, that in transformation, we actually honor what was, because there's something about, I was married for 8.5 years, together with this person for a decade. How do we honor what was? And it's not just about honoring the other person at that point. It's honoring who I was, honoring that 18-year-old girl who fell so in love and got married and tried her hardest. And it didn't happen the way that I had dreamed or wished. And for so long, I looked back on that girl with so much judgment. And so if I really think that in the transformation now today, I can actually honor that girl and honor the relationship. I mean, I love this man. And so if I allow myself to be transformed still by the loss, man, doesn't that honor the girl who gave, I mean, so much of her life. It's funny when we think about our life, under 30, under 40, that's literally almost half of your conscious life, is with that person in your 20s. And so how do we really alchemize? And I love the concept of alchemy. How do we transform something that is so devastating into something that is so beautiful? And Jesse, I just saw your comment. It's so hard to love our old selves. And I feel that so much. I look back on this 20-year-old girl and I looked at her with so much judgment. Like, how could you be so dumb getting married at 20? You're a child bride. You know what I mean? Like, what are you thinking? And man, if we are able to look back and allow for so much grace for that former self and for that person that really did their best. And I think that that's the beauty of it. Someone actually told me this story. They were in a coaching course group, and they were effectively had the two youngest people of the group come and stand before the entirety of the group. And they were two 25-year-olds, one woman, one man. And the coach at the time said, I want you all to look at these two people, this man and this woman, 25 years old, so young. And he said, these are the ages of your parents. These are the ages of the people that you're blaming for everything that happened in your life. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. It's, wow, these people were so young, our parents, that we point fingers at and say, how could you do this to me? How could you raise me this way? How could you believe this? How could you pass down these narratives? But y'all, we do that to ourselves. I remember it was about 3 years ago. I was on the phone with my best friend and I walked into my parents' house and I saw this picture of my former husband and me. And this was after he left. I don't know why this picture was sitting out on my parents' table, but it was. And it was this picture of the two of us. And I just looked so happy in the picture. And it was at my younger sister's graduation. And it was, it was actually a really sweet picture. But when I saw it, I was so taken off guard. And man, I felt so upset seeing that picture. And he asked me, he was like, Christene, who are you looking at in that picture? Who are you upset at in that picture? And I realized in that moment, I was like, oh, I'm actually not upset at him. I'm upset at me. Like, I had so much judgment towards that little girl in that picture. And he was like, Christene, how old are you in that picture? And I said, I'm 23. And he said, why are you happy? And I was like, well, nothing bad was happening. Someone in his family was struggling with alcohol abuse, and they had stabled by that point. My sister and her baby girl who had moved in with us after Nate passed, things had stabilized there. She was doing better and was happier. And I was like, I look so happy because everything was fine. Like, nothing was in crisis mode. And, I was maybe I was 24 then, but 23, 24. And he was like, I want you to think of someone who is 23 or 24 right now in your life. And I pictured my baby sister, who was at that time 23. And my best friend said to me, he was like, Christene, imagine your baby sister experiencing everything you did during that time. The loss of your brother-in-law, having your sister and her daughter live with you, having your husband have that family member who was experiencing significant alcohol addiction and then taking care of them. And he was like, I want you to now picture your baby sister in that situation. And how do you feel towards her? And it was wild. The lens of judgment, which I viewed myself looking at that picture now with all that context, and now also viewing my baby sister in that role, I just felt so proud of that girl. And it was so funny because it's so much easier sometimes for us to just hold this, and actually right now I feel it in my stomach. I'm like, man, it's so easy for us to hold this impossible standard, this standard that we literally cannot meet. Like, why do we hold this standard for ourselves that we know is fundamentally impossible? And as I'm thinking about it now, I think that there's something about, it's like, it's not self-flagellation. It's almost like cutting yourself, like the self-infliction of pain and self-affliction of, wow, punishment, and what is that? And I don't even know if I have an answer for myself. I've honestly never thought about it in this context before, but to have such an impossible standard that I know I will never be able to achieve is effectively self-affliction. And perhaps it's punishment. Perhaps it's, I don't know. I think that honestly, I think it's respective for each one of us. But if we really think about it, why am I holding myself to such an impossible standard? Now, not everyone struggles with this. I know a lot of people that are very content um, with holding a standard that, frankly, maybe they're not even able to maximize their own potential because their standard is so low, right? So maybe there's the in between of people of, these people have an impossible standard. These folks perhaps have too low of a standard. Y'all, it's so important that we understand how we view ourselves and that we understand the standard to which we're holding ourselves, because then the question becomes, am I even holding myself to something that is fair, reasonable, loving? Brene Brown said this in Daring Greatly, and this really impacted me. I read her book right around the time that I started therapy almost 5 years ago. And she said, effectively, the same measure of judgment which we apply to ourselves, we apply to others. And at the time when I read that, I was like, there is no way. Like, I am so much easier on everybody else than I am on myself. But when I really leaned into it, I know that at kind of the end of my rope, when I get to that point of being exhausted and when I get to the point of fatigue, I actually do start applying a similar judgment and a similar standard for other people that I do for myself. And if my own standard is impossible to meet, it's going to be impossible to meet for them. So then the question becomes even more than just what's the standard I'm holding for myself, is what's the standard I'm subconsciously holding for other people that then leads to resentment, that then leads to this impossible ability for them to please, for them to come in on top, for them to win, for them to please us. Man, it's so funny. I'm so grateful that we're talking about this, because honestly, I realized this weekend it makes me feel so uncomfortable even now. And I feel so loved, and it makes me feel so uncomfortable to feel loved. I had people fly in from all over the country, from Seattle to Florida to Texas to Maine, come in for this weekend to celebrate me. I really, really feel so uncomfortable with that. And I made the weekend to be about celebrating everybody, because I didn't need or necessarily even want people to come in to celebrate me, but my birthday was the excuse of like, come celebrate life. And I actually think it's incredibly dangerous, because I know that I almost want to push people away from loving me, but I want to give all the love to them. But then what happens, and I've seen this happen for me and to me and because of me so many times, I get so fatigued and so tired that I'm doing so much for everybody, when in reality, they actually want to give it to me in return, but I'm just unwilling to accept it. It's like I'm giving, but I'm also extending my arms and protecting myself from everybody else coming in, rather than almost like this like really loving embrace where, I don't know, that's probably I feel kind of silly giving that analogy, but the analogy that I initially gave of like, almost like here, I'm giving everything to you, but I'm actually kind of blocking you from being able to access me. Man, I feel like that's so dangerous. And Jesse, I just saw your comment here. I hold people to such a high standards to love me. So this is what's so interesting. And I want to hear more from you in this regard, because man, maybe even, and Jesse just said this, it's a trust issue for me. I have this narrative, and I'm so glad you said that, because at the end of the day, I told myself, I remember this distinctly. I was sitting in my bedroom at 9 years old, looking out the window, and I always wanted to be this philosopher when I was a kid. And I didn't know what philosophy was, but I had this urge in me, like there's something deeper inside me, and I just don't know what it is or how to access it or how to think deeply. And I kind of always felt like there was something more to unlock. And during this time of looking out the window, feeling wistful, and feeling alone. I'm fourth in the lineup of 6 kids. So I've got 2 littles and 3 olders. And I was right there sandwiched in the middle. And I was 5 years younger than my oldest sister, and then 4 years older than my younger, and then 6 years older than my youngest sister. So those two are really close. And then I've got the 3 older siblings that were really close. And so when I was 9 years old, I remember looking out the window and saying, God, it's you and me against the world. And man, y'all, I actually think I've really held on to that narrative in a really dangerous way. And I think that it's fundamentally been kind of this stiff arming, keeping people away from me. And what's so interesting is that over the last 3 to 4 years of doing this work of coming to know who I am, I've really come to be like, oh my gosh, like I actually I really love who I am. And I love who I am when I'm alone. It's hard. I actually said this to my friend today. I don't trust myself when I'm with other people. Like I actually continue to prove to be unsafe when I'm in relationship. I don't stand up for what is true for me in my experience. And when I say that, very distinctly, I had a moment on Tuesday where something happened, and it was very wrong what the other person did to me. And in that moment, rather than allowing myself to feel disappointed, rather than allowing myself to feel upset, instead I actually felt embarrassed because I was so trusting of this person that I actually didn't know really what they were saying to me. And then when I finally realized that they were going back on their word, I was like, oh, I literally said, I feel so embarrassed that I didn't catch on sooner. And I just, no, like they were wrong. Why did I feel embarrassed when I was actually wronged in that moment? And so I keep proving to this little girl inside me, this little girl who told herself it's me and God against the world. I keep proving to that little girl that actually it is, because big Christene isn't brave enough to protect little Christene to then change the narrative. Because if I really could show that little girl that I'll protect her in those situations and protect me in those situations of being in relationship, it's like, man, I wonder how that would change in relationships. So if I build the muscle and do the reps and work out the ability to be able to show up in relationships, knowing that I will speak the truth and knowing that I'm not alone and that I can receive love, but I have to build the foundation of, yes, loving myself. I think that that's absolutely number one. And I didn't have that for so long. But then number 2, what I'm really learning and focusing on now is, how do I maintain vertical alignment in horizontal relationships? How do I allow for myself to be so grounded, so aware, so alert, so that I can, it's like, easily access the truth. It's like the truth isn't something that I have to go find and search for and sift through, which frankly currently it is right now. It's only in the quiet and in the solitude of my vertical alignments that I actually am like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that that's what it was, or that that's how I was feeling. The truth of my experience around certain things, normally in regards to relationships, still feels very buried, and I have to go intentionally seek it out to then be able to pull it out, examine it, and be like, oh wow, okay, I didn't know that was happening. And it's effectively going into the subconscious and being able to go and do the work. Yeah, and Jesse, you just said taking on others' struggles and not taking it personally. I could not relate with that anymore, because there's something about being able to, then it's not just for our own sake, right? That we have the ability to know the truth and to be able to coexist in relationships and maintain vertical alignment. Then we can engage horizontally. Someone else can be having a hard time. Someone else can be coming in and sharing their experience, and we can remain strong in ours. That's what is so mind blowing. As I say that, I'm like, well, not really. It's more so exciting. It's really freeing to think that they can have an experience and we can have an experience. And that doesn't mean that because I'm disappointed that anything terrible happened, right? Just because you're upset, that doesn't actually mean I did anything wrong, and vice versa. However, allowing for, Jesse, you said this just now, love and serving. Like having those be, and those are the outpouring of vertical alignment. It's effectively like this fountain. If I am full and I am healthy with me, with who I'm called to be, I think of vertical alignment as effectively a hierarchy translating down from who did God say that I am? What's my ideal? How do I align my behaviors, mindsets, beliefs, all of which need to come under the guise and rule of the moral hierarchy. And then that then spills over into relationship and spills over into love and serving, but it's coming from a full place. It's not coming from this point of deficiency and this point of lack. It's coming actually from the overflow of an abundance from within. And that changes everything. But what I'm realizing as well is that truth is actually a part of that overflow. And for so long, I've been, even in my book, I talk a lot about how love is the overflow, but truth needs to be a part of that, because otherwise love is not safe. Love is blind. That's not true. And so if we really allow for truth and love to go hand in hand, and even in the biblical scriptures, it says, what is it? Grace and truth. Truth and love need to be going hand in hand. And that's where the power lies. That's in the ability to see real change. And actually, a friend of mine said this. He said, impact is when action happens. And I've thought about that the other day. I was like, wow, okay. If I don't just want impact as most people say it. And frankly, how I've said it up until he said that. And I was like, okay, yes, impact is action. And so if I want my vertical alignment to then drive impact on a horizontal landscape, I need to be operating with the bounds and within the guides and bounds of love and truth. But we have to recognize, and truth has really become illuminated over the last couple of days for me. Actually, yesterday I was on set at Johns Hopkins. It was such a fun acting job at Johns Hopkins University, overlooking the Capitol in Washington, D.C. It was a blast. But it was so interesting. It was something like I've never experienced before. We were in a room and they were doing almost like a case study simulation type of exercise, where there was a legitimate professor from Hopkins seated at the front of the room, and there were 4 of us. And effectively, the practice was that each one of us had 100 units likened to effort. And it was supposed to simulate like a workplace environment. And so for every unit, we could give a unit from 0, and we could give a unit up to 100. And for every unit that we gave, it would be added to the lump sum, multiplied by 2, divided by 4, because there were 4 of us. So everyone, whatever we contributed, would be added to the group and then divided evenly after multiplied by 2. So the impact of this was effectively intended to teach us that it's more effective in a group setting. It's more effective to go together than to go alone. However, we decided not to contribute. We could keep for ourselves. And so we all kind of went around and we're doing this game. And he asked each one of us, why did you contribute what you did? And in the second round, people contributed, but we had the opportunity to contribute and then, have the take home pay, so to say, of what we don't spend. But then we could also apply what we don't spend as punitive punishment for those around us. So, for example, in the first round, I had to go first, which was a little bit risky because I had no idea what anyone else was going to give in terms of their units for efforts. So I said 25% or 75%. And I said, 75%, I'm giving that much because I've interacted with my teammates a little bit, have a semblance of an idea of their values, but I don't really know. And so the 25 I'm keeping for me. I know that I can take that. I know my own ability. I know my own ability to alchemize, and I'm playing a role, but I was kind of predicating it on running a business and such. So I was like 25%. I know what I can do with that at home. The woman next to me gave 75. The woman across from me gave 75. And then it came to the last gentleman, Trey. He gave 62. And immediately I was like, that's not fair. Each one of us gave 75%. And I knew that there would be that person. And so effectively, that's partially why I didn't give my, a whole 100, because I knew that there would be that outlier of the person to not contribute. I'm saying all of this because in the next round, we had the opportunity to give punitive action or punitive punishment for the action that the other person takes. And so in this next round, I went first again. I said 80%, but I'm reserving 20 for punitive action because fairness is a deep value to me. And then the woman next to me, she actually gave 100%. The woman across from me, I think she gave 75. And then the gentleman, he didn't give 62, he gave 90. So I ended up being kind of right there in the middle with equilibrium. And then at the end, it was, do you want to apply punishment? And I said, no, but can we profit share? Because everyone was very generous this time. However, the reason why I bring this up is because in that moment, I learned something new about myself. And y'all, the more we put ourselves in new environments, the more we get to learn about ourselves. If we're constantly doing the same thing day after day after day, in the realm of certainty, we never learn something new. And Joe Dispenza's event that I attended 2 weeks ago, effectively, he talks about only in the unknown can we create. And I just love that framework because that's exactly what I've experienced. And he put language to it, which is so accurate. In the unknown lies true creation, lies new revelation. In the known, in the certainty, it's just repetition and habit. So what I learned in this new strange environment, which I probably will never go back to, I learned and saw that I literally was willing to lose, because that's the only way that you could apply punitive action was I would have to pay a unit to take 3 units from them. And it's not like I would take it. I just visualize like Monopoly, when you're playing Monopoly with your family or friends and you've got that middle pot where the money goes, like you're paying your taxes. Nobody gets it. So for every unit I would pay to take 3 from them, it's not like either one of us wins. But there was something about that actually felt right. It felt just. They didn't contribute as much as me or anyone else in the group. That's not how it works. We shouldn't all be able to benefit fairly without equal and fair contribution to the work. And as I was processing this today, I realized that truth without justice is terrifying. What's the point of telling the truth without any action being taken? Then it's just a whole bunch of I feel this, I feel that, without any ability to follow through on any real action to then allow for change. We talk about impact. Impact is action. Impact is change. And so love and truth need to be the cornerstones that propel change, that propel transformation, that propel true impact that leads to action. But if it's just love and just truth without any semblance of action associated with it, it's just a whole bunch of, I talk a lot about the intelligences, activating each one, the intellectual intelligence, our mind, the emotional intelligence, our soul, our spiritual intelligence, our spirit, and the physical intelligence, literally our body. And so for each one of those to truly be changed and experience transformation, and when you think about these intelligences, so much of the time, they're cultivated by childhood and in childhood. But if we don't take time in adulthood to kind of mold and shape and bring into alignment these intelligences, they're going to be firing from all sides from their data points that are all resting in our subconscious, which we have not informed and designed by our own intention. So we have to take the time to not just apply new inputs to inform these intelligences, but also to apply discipline, to allow for, it's kind of like the prodding. I'm thinking of, literally animals when they're walking, you kind of prod and poke a little bit just to keep them on the right track. Horses wear blinders to keep them focused. Even when you're bowling on an alleyway for the kids, you put bumpers up to make sure they hit their target. What is the type of discipline we need to put in our lives to ensure that we hit our target, to ensure that we're actually aiming in the right direction, to ensure that we're moving powerfully and in a way that really, really allows for the type of change that we want to see, not just in our lives, not just on the vertical level, but on the horizontal too. Bob, you just said, I love this. I learn something new about myself every day and challenge myself every day. I want to live like that. But y'all, we have to have these parameters set up to keep us in the right vein and to keep us in the right action or in the right direction for the right action. And so there is something about discipline and punishment that is really, really important. And I say punishment because that's the words that were used in the onset yesterday in the acting regard. But discipline is so important. And I think that we can err on the side of getting too soft. I love Teddy Roosevelt's in the Man in the Arena quote. Man, that's so good. And he talks so much about it's not the critic who counts. It's literally the man in the arena, the man whose face is marred and dusty, and he's really trying, but he knows failure and he knows triumph. There's something about that knowing on like a visceral level, like he's engaged with life. He's taking life and living it to the fullest extent possible. Honestly, it reminds me of my dear friend Steve Sims. He has this book titled Go for Stupid, and he literally took life and lived it, every ounce of it. And that's how I want to live. I don't want to look back and think, man, I have the regrets. That's what they say when they're old and in their rocking chairs, y'all. But now's our time to make sure that we don't end up in that place. And so yesterday, even I was driving home and I was remembering when I was in Paris for 2 weeks. And one of the things that really stuck with me was how much these Frenchmen just don't give a rip what anyone thinks about them. They're fearless, probably to the point of they could probably use a little bit more empathy. And how do we engage with life so fearless so that we'll ask for what we want, so that we show up the way that we want to, so that we show up in a way that we're proud of? When we were kids, this is why we go back in the past, because when we were kids, we were fearless. When we were kids, we were daring, we dreamed big, and we didn't let ourselves be informed by the horizontal. So if we're informed by the vertical, if we're told from kind of almost like, man, if we're informed by the dreams of the past, by the innate kind of almost like guttural instincts, while also being informed from above, from the ability to be learning from the hierarchical transcendence of the divine down through my ideal, who do I even want to be? That needs to inform me as well, while also remembering that little girl, while also remembering those dreams that I used to have, the ability to put on the funny makeup and the funny dress and be silly and laugh and not care what people think, while also maintaining an ability to assess, okay, this is who I want to be. Now, how do I have right action in the direction to guide me closer to that person? So in summation, y'all, this is such an important discussion for us to have tonight of what are the things that are subconsciously driving us and dictating the way in which we show up every single day? Do we actually love who we are so that the overflow of ourselves is life-giving to other people, that our horizontal is truly in alignment with our vertical? And I'm so working on that. I feel like I've gotten to a decent place with my vertical where now I'm like, okay, how do they work together? How do they intersect? But the clearer I am on my values and the more time I take to live according to that when I'm alone. And then the third piece is showing up in relationship aware and literally awake. I lived 28 years of my life asleep and I cannot go back. But the more I live on autopilot, the more I default in behaviors without living with intention, I will live asleep. And there's nothing I can do about that apart from doing the work now to awaken myself every morning, but then also at multiple points throughout the day to ensure that, oh, I came out of alignment, need to come back into it. Now let me proceed into my next meeting. But if we're going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, of course we're going to come out of alignment. And when I say alignment, it's the behaviors, beliefs, thoughts, actions, attitudes that show up in every regard, in every area of our life, regardless of whether it's personal or professional. So with that, I hope you have